In the last video, we saw how to make a simple button, but we ran into a problem, and that was when we moved the button and adjusted these parameters, the coordinates for clicking logic had to all be changed one by one over here, which is very inefficient and annoying. So in this video, we're going to solve this problem by using objects. We need to figure out a nice way to pass the information into draw button and make that information available to mouse clicked, so we simply just change a couple variables. I can think of a few options, and I'll paste them in some multi-line comment code here. Okay. One might be creating global variables for the position and size of each button. Another might be introducing a global array that stores all the parameters. Introducing a global object that stores the parameters is another. And using object-oriented principles to define the button and store the properties isn't quite another one. But which do we choose? Well, I don't like this first one because we'll have to add so many global variables if we used multiple buttons, so I'll delete that. I don't like this second technique because it's hard to read code that grabs data based on array indices. I like the third option because it introduces only one global variable or global object and will produce more readable code. I also like this fourth technique because we're using object-oriented principles to create generic button object types. But let's save that for later. We can create our global button 1 object like so. Variable button 1 equals a new object. And inside we're going to give it some properties. The x is 100, the y is 100, the width is 150, and the height is 50. And now we just change the draw button function to accept a single object that it then grabs properties from. And that object it will actually grab from is going to be this button argument. And I'm going to give the button some properties so that when we call this function and give it the different objects, it'll be able to pull properties from that object, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. It's very cool how we can do this. It's also very easy and very helpful because we can do a lot with this. So now we just add the button 1 object, and what it does is it takes the properties, the x, y, width, and height properties from button 1 and actually uses those properties in when it displays this button, and that's really cool. So now what we actually have to do now is adjust these hard-coded values to actually just be the button 1 object and properties, so that when we adjust the button 1 properties, these change as well, and that's very helpful. And I'm just going to replace all these. Button 1.y, button 1.y, and going to be the height here. Okay, now this mouse click logic should work now that we've added the properties. There we go. So now if I move these, or if I change these values and actually change the x position, the mouse clicked function actually changes the logic it checks each time, and that's really helpful. So the whole point of that was to enable us to easily add more buttons, the ultimate reusability test. So can we do that though? We'll start with a new global object called button 2, and actually just give it the same properties as button 1, except I'll change its y position to 200, and actually just go ahead and change this x to 100. So now we're going to pass in this new object for the draw button function that we're going to call again. There we go. Now we're drawing it twice. We also need to add this new logic for the second button, since this is just checking the first object. I'll actually change this to else if, because that's a bit more efficient. So button 2, we're going to just change all that. And we should have a working program now with this. Yes, we do. It all works. Now actually, let me make sure that this is a different message. You clicked second button. Okay, now let's see what happens. You click second button and you clicked me. Good. But doesn't all this repeated code just make you cringe? Let's actually make a function called isMouseInside that knows how to check any button object and return true if the mouse was inside it. So variable isMouseInside equals function. And, I'm actually going to give it a button object to accept. And there we go. Now inside we're going to return true if the logic in the mouse clicked is also true. So copy and paste. But because I'm taking properties from this object, I have to change this to just button, because button 1 is an object we already defined and it's global. So there we go. And now we can actually just replace all this logic with the function because it has all the logic inside it. So if isMouseInside returns true and the mouse is inside the button 1 parameters, it will do this, and it will print that. And now if it does the same for the second button, button 2, it will print you clicked second button. And here we go. It works perfectly. And that's really efficient because we actually made a function that shortens all the code. And there we have it. We've used functions to draw multiple buttons and made it relatively easy to add new buttons. And you can try this out. We could keep going, making arrays of all the buttons in a program, making it possible to customize the label and color of a button, but hopefully this has given you a good basis in how to create simple buttons using functions. Next, we'll walk through how to create buttons with object-oriented principles. Hope you enjoyed.